guest, Ginger Miller, who has also is also the head of our Women's Veteran Council for Biden, but is a woman veteran who has done an incredible amount for women veterans and to fight homelessness in the veteran community. So tonight, I will just make everyone aware we are streaming live with Facebook, and we would love to have all of you share, ask questions, pop those in the chat box. We have someone monitoring the chat box, but know that we also have questions coming in from Twitter and Facebook. So we're going to do our best to manage those in the short time that we have here tonight. I am going to introduce first Jason Kander, the former Secretary of State for the state of Missouri, a Army veteran, and a veteran who has been incredibly bold in sharing his story, in speaking plainly about the issues that are just at the heart of where policy and government meets the veteran experience and the transition to the civilian world. So it's an honor to have him here with us tonight. I'm grateful for him supporting us in Vets for Biden, and I hope you all enjoy hearing from him. Jason, thank you so much for being here with us. Oop. Unmute. Jason Kander.
Okay, yeah, thanks. It's gonna, yeah, I had to get your permission on the way this contraption works. Claire, thanks so much for having me. Thanks for the invite. Thank you to everybody who's watching. I mean, look, I bet a lot of you have Netflix subscriptions, but you're here. So I think that speaks to your sense of duty and patriotism and how much you care about what happens in this election. So thank you. I'll keep the opening part kind of brief here, and I'll tell you a little bit of my story and how it interacts with the next president, and frankly, also the next vice president. So I was one of, I don't know, what were there, like 50 people in 2017, 2018 who were thinking they were going to run for president in the Democratic primary. I was one of those people. So I was running all over the country, giving speeches, fighting against voter suppression, that kind of thing. Meanwhile, what I had been struggling with for almost a decade at that point was undiagnosed, untreated post-traumatic stress. And we can get more into that, and I'm sure we'll get more into that conversation. But that eventually caught up to me. And as it started to catch up to me, I decided, I don't think I'm going to run for president. I think I'm going to go home. I'm going to run for mayor in my hometown, Kansas City, and I'm going to get help at the VA. I went home, ran for mayor. That was going great. I was going to win, probably by a fair amount. And I didn't step up and do what I planned to do and go to the VA and get help because of the stigma, because I believed I hadn't earned it. Not that uncommon when you listen to a lot of veterans who have been through the same thing. And then that really caught up to me. And I had to stop running for mayor, had to give up the opportunity to be mayor in order to go and get serious about getting help, and frankly, to save my own life. And when I made that announcement, I didn't know what was going to happen. All I knew was I was trading in the one thing that was going really well in my life, which was my career, for frankly a leap of faith on the idea that I could get better and that I could heal. And there were it was a big story, right? And a lot of people in both parties said nice things publicly. But then there were some people who called and who demonstrated how much they cared. And as I tell you this part, I just want you to compare it in your mind to what the current president has said about people with post-traumatic stress, right? He has said that combat veterans with post-traumatic stress, that they're the ones who couldn't handle it, and the ones who aren't stricken with it, that they're strong. Well, that's not helpful, obviously. But Vice President Biden called me. He texted me. He made sure that he got through. He cared as a human being. He checked up on me afterwards. And frankly, so did Kamala Harris. We spoke several times as well. I ended up informally advising her on veterans and national security issue during her campaign in the primary. And on those calls, we would talk, and then she would have all staff leave the room, and then she just wanted to find out how I was doing. She wanted to learn more about the process, about what it's like to go to the VA and to do that kind of work. And she cared about me as a person. And I don't think it's because I'm me. I don't think it's because I had been in the same arena as them. I think it's because I'm a human being, and these two human beings care about other human beings. It's a little sad that that is a remarkable superlative to say about a presidential candidate in our day and age, but I think it's a really important distinction in this race. So that's why I'm here. I just wanted to start by telling you why I'm here. We can get more in, if you like, to the work that I do now with veterans homelessness and that kind of thing, but I know we're going to have a discussion. And I just like to start out with personally why I care so much about this and why I'm a surrogate for the Biden campaign and why I'm here tonight.
Well, Jason, thank you so much. We will definitely get more into that. I'm excited about our next guest, Will Delaney. I have my cousin works for the National Association of Drug Court Professionals and has worked hard at building up the veteran court network and addressing the needs of veterans in the judicial system. And Will Delaney is a name that has come up several times over the course of the last several years when talking to my cousin about veteran policy and the transition veterans make from active duty to becoming a veteran. It's a title that is specific to having served. And so Will is a Marine Corps veteran with a really compelling story about a struggle with transition and one that really he had an experience with our alternative sentencing in our judicial system and has really built an incredibly meaningful life out of what could have been real tragedy. So it's an honor to introduce Will tonight, and I'm excited for him to share his story with you all. Will, it's great to have you here with us.
Thank you, Claire. Good evening, Jason, Claire, everybody else out in virtual world who's tuning in, honored guests. My name is William Delaney, and I'm here because my life was profoundly changed by the efforts that the Obama-Biden administration did to look at issues differently in order to help people like me affect long-term positive change. On January 24th, 2020, I'll have been clean and sober for exactly 7 years. What happened? Well, it's a long story, but bear with me, it gets good at the end. I grew up in a small New England town from a long line of Army officers. My grandfather earned the Distinguished Flying Cross as a bomber pilot in World War II. My other grandfather served as a tank commander in the Korean War. And during the Vietnam conflict, he trained Les Montagnards with the fabled MACV-SOG. My father served in a mobile Army surgical hospital in the Republic of Vietnam and then retired from the VA. And I have two uncles who are West Point graduates. So my path was laid out before me. So as any good patriotic kid would do, I took the ASVAB, the military entrance exam, when I graduated from high school. I did well and I had a lot of options. But then I said to hell with them all and joined the Marines. For me, it was all about the road less traveled, right? I spent 4 years on active duty in various roles as a parachute rigger, malfunctions NCO, as a operations NCO, jump master, and a point man, and as a point man on a fire power control team, as a parachute safety officer on a supporting arms liaison team with a small, relatively unknown unit in the Marines whose specialty is inserting forward of enemy lines to call in airstrikes, artillery, and naval gunfire. Needless to say, we worked very hard, so we felt entitled to play even harder. I served honorably and was being meritoriously promoted, but chose to call it a day after my unit disbanded when a teammate lost his life in a parachute accident. Yeah, I got out and moved home to Boston and went to college full time while also joining a long-range surveillance detachment in the National Guard. I was excited for these new challenges, but for the life of me, I couldn't figure out why I was so difficult to get along with. For me, the answer was always waiting at the liquor store. I thought that blackout drinking, getting into fights, passing out in bushes, waking up in hospital beds, winding up in drunk tanks and jail cells was completely normal behavior. While in college, I stayed busy, but for the most part, I kept it together. I graduated with honors, got married, and at my wife's request, I hung up my jump boots for good. But before long, my drinking progressed to the point where the stupid things I used to do and get away with in the Marines started getting me into trouble in the civilian world. I then spent the better part of a decade drinking myself out of job after job and destroying everything in my path until I was chronically unemployed, homeless, and alone. I finally bottomed out on January 4th, 2014. Found myself in another state police drunk tank after yet another alcohol-related arrest. You know, almost dying numerous times, losing everything, I was okay with that. But the look in the state trooper's eyes that I saw reflected back at me said it all. It wounded my soul. I knew I had to stop drinking, but I didn't know how else to cope with the pain of being alive. I found my way into a veterans treatment court the following day and have been clean and sober ever since. This showed me that things could be different if I was willing to learn how to be differently. This encouraged me to embrace sobriety with a zeal that I hadn't known since the days that I first earned the title of Marine or pinned on my master parachutist wings. And that's what I think this is all about hope. Joe talked about it last night. Hope that tomorrow can be better. Hope that there can be a purpose to it all. And I found that in a courtroom of all places, and I found it in the eyes of a judge. And that is specifically part of why, to me, it's so important that we do our part. I could have been another statistic. I spent years passively doing my part to be one of the 22. And the last time I ever drank, when I sobered up at that last moment and saw the headlights coming at me, realized I was driving the wrong way on the highway. I was that close to being that statistic. And my life could be over right now. But, you know, legislators took a chance on me and believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself. And that is what it's all about to me. And then after all this, in celebration of my second year of sobriety, I went back to that same court and volunteered as a mentor. And then when I went to decide to become a social worker and go to graduate school, the judge and my probation officers wrote my entrance recommendations. Apparently they wrote pretty good ones because I got in. And I graduated last year, and and I have the cool letters next to my name, right? And I've had business cards that said court next to them. Well, that was a big deal for me to be one of the good guys again, right? I've always thought of myself as just a knucklehead corporal. And to be now, to devote the rest of my life working with other vets who have struggled just like me and trying to make a difference with homelessness, trying to make a difference with substance use and trauma. I wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for the decisions that the Obama-Biden administration had to expand veteran treatment courts nationwide, or the way they looked at criminal justice reform. I wouldn't be one of the good guys again. So thank you for letting me share my story today. It really means the world to me. And it was my favorite poet, Emily Dickinson, once wrote, "Success is counted sweetest." Thank you.
Will, thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for, reminding us all that what this conversation is about now is what we all can do for those that have served, that are making that same transition that Jason made, that you made, that I've made, that my husband one day will have to make. You know, there's a lot of talk about the way that Donald Trump treats veterans or speaks about our military, and one of the real issues I have with the response is that we focus so much on Donald Trump and his bad behavior, and there is a lot of work that we have to do for our veterans coming back into society and making this transition. Let's see. So I'm really excited about I'm excited about everyone who's here tonight, but I'm very excited to introduce our next panelist, Ginger Miller. I have worked very long hours and late nights with Ginger over the course of the last several months on the campaign. She is a Navy veteran. She is married to a Marine Corps veteran. She too has a very compelling story about her own struggles in transitioning into the civilian world. And she is also someone who has taken her struggles and taken the strength that she has gained from what she has struggled with and turned it into action. And she founded an organization called Women's Veteran Interactive. She works hard with women veterans, and she's very focused on the issue of homelessness in veterans and the economic empowerment of veterans. But she's just an incredibly dedicated American who works so hard every day right now to get Joe Biden elected. And so, Ginger, it's an honor to introduce you and have you share a bit of your story with us and talk a little bit about how your story and your struggle relates to Joe Biden and the future of this country.
Thank you so much, Claire, for that wonderful introduction. Hello to all of the panelists and to everyone out there in Facebook land. I do see that we're on Facebook Live. I just left from another event that we had for the Women Veterans Council for Biden. And I told them, okay, I have to jump over to a different time zone. And I'm glad that this is virtual because I would have never had made it. But when you're virtual, you can do all type of amazing things. Nevertheless, my name is Ginger Miller, and I'm really excited to be here on this event because I know we have a very sensitive topic. And, you know, one of the things I will say before I get started, and I know my time is limited, that veterans, we have incredible strength that I don't think any other folks who have not served have, because we just overcome so many internal struggles, you know, that would wipe ordinary folks out. And I could speak for myself. I went into the military to get the GI Bill. My family are immigrants from Honduras, so they didn't know anything about financial aid or college and things of that nature. So I went into the Navy, promised myself that I would never get married, I would never have kids, I would just tour the world. I got 4 years of shore duty right out of boot camp, and I got stationed, right? Jason's laughing at me, right? You're in the Navy, you get 4 years of shore duty, right? I didn't know what was going on. And I got stationed in Annapolis, Maryland, had never heard of Annapolis, Maryland, and I'm from New York, and ended up meeting this very handsome Marine who was standing gate at the Naval Station, at the Naval Academy, and we ended up getting married in 6 months, which was totally incredible. Then we got shipped out to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and that's where my life started taking a different turn, because when my husband got back from Operation Desert Storm, or it was either Sharp Edge, one out to two, he came back with post-traumatic stress disorder, and he decided to get out of the Marine Corps, and I was going to become the lifer and stay in the Navy. And then I got into a car accident where I couldn't walk. The car flipped 3 times. I couldn't walk for like 17 days, hospitalized for 21 days. And then I got into a boat accident. I ran aground a couple of times out there at the Intercoastal Waterway. And ultimately, I ended up getting a medical discharge. And that's when my life took a turn that leads me to where I am today in this journey, because upon getting that medical discharge, we figured we would go back to New York and stay with my family until my husband could find a job and get his post-traumatic stress disorder together, which never happened. He couldn't find a job. The job that he got fell through. It was a roller coaster ride, and his post-traumatic stress disorder kicked into high gear. And my family basically told me that I had to take my crazy husband and find some place to go. I don't really fault them for that, because when you don't come from a military town and you don't come from a military family, what do you expect? So we became homeless. And that is, you know, I've done several of these events, and I never, Claire said to me the other night, Ginger, you never talk about your story. I really talk about my story for two reasons. Number one, when I tell my story first, people get stuck there at Ginger Miller, the homeless veteran. Like, they can't get past that. It's almost like a stigma that you have, just like a PTSD or MST. And then it still hurts. It hurts really bad to know that you could serve a country, raise your right hand, not just you, but your spouse. And then when you get out, you don't transition well and you become homeless. And as a woman veteran in the early 90s, like, no one was even thinking about women veterans in the early 90s. No one was thinking about my husband, who was in his 20s in the early 90s, because we were still focusing on the Vietnam era veterans. So we suffered. We suffered for a very long time because I was the stronger one. I did not know where to reach for help. I didn't even know how to bring it out of my mouth that I was a homeless woman veteran. So I worked 3 jobs, went to school full time to pull me and my family out of that homelessness state. And I said, you know what, if I would have had a mentor back then, like some of these great programs that we have now to help veterans transition in, someone would have probably said, instead of you working 3 jobs part-time and going to school full-time, go to school part-time and work full-time, because you can get out of homelessness quicker. But when you're trying to survive, and I'm not even talking about thrive, I'm talking about survive, when you don't know where your next meal is coming from, when you don't know if your husband is going to go off the deep end, when you're trying to shack up in the car, on the couch, in a hotel, you're not thinking right. You know, and that's why I have become who I am today in the veterans community, because it still hurts. It still hurts to know that the country I serve, that I was there for, that I almost died for, that my husband almost died for, was not there for me. And it's not even a matter of this country was not there for me. Did they even know how to be there for me? I don't think the country knew. And this country still doesn't know how to be there for veterans. And that's why I'm casting my vote for Joe Biden, because he knows. He knows how to be there for veterans. You know, bring joining forces back, do what you need to do. But we've been working night and day and night on this Women Veterans Council for Biden, having meeting for meeting, going place to place to make sure that every veteran and every civilian and anybody in their right mind will cast their vote for Joe Biden. Because my thing is this, I don't want any other woman veteran to go through what I went through, because it's real. Like, how do you ever get rid of the pain? Like, I do a lot of great things. I'm a 2013 White House Champion for Change. I'm on all these different speaking gigs for the administration, doing all, it's crazy. But that hurt is still there, because I live in a country that didn't know how to support me. And that's why I started my organization, to make sure that no other woman veteran would have to suffer in silence. So that if you do have the courage to reach out for help, we're going to be there for you. And then even as a country, this is the first campaign that has ever given women veterans a space to host our meetings. So they're considering us as real citizens. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on and on and give you a million reasons why I'm voting for Joe Biden. But at the end of the day, to those of you who are on this Zoom, on this meeting, to those of you who are in Facebook land, and for those of you who are going to watch the recording, you need to realize why you need to vote for Joe Biden. A vote for Joe Biden means a vote for humanity. We have children right now who they don't even know where their parents are. And these children are still in cages. This is not Black. This is not white. This is humanity. And as veterans, I'm super proud of the work that we have all done to support Joe Biden because we are showing up in record numbers. We're out here. And if nobody else can do it, we can. Because there's enough of us and we're strong enough and we know the way. Thank you.
Well, Ginger, thank you so much. I have been on many, many events with Ginger. I've never actually heard that story. And so one of the things that I would love for each of you to talk about, and what I know to be true, you know, in my own active duty spouse who most recently came home from Iraq just last December, about a year ago, is, you know, I would like for each of you to talk about your struggle to actually get help, to admit that you need help. One of the things that I know, my husband, my brother-in-law, and myself, that the real struggle is, it wasn't that bad for me. I couldn't possibly need, you know, there's so many people that had it worse. And actually getting help is so hard. So this is a two-part kind of question for each of you. I'd love for you to start, Jason, but talking about the decision to actually get help, and then kind of the way that you see a Biden administration being able to provide help and actually make it easier to get that help once you make that really difficult decision as a veteran to ask for help.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. I think that sets it up the perfect way. This is my first time Zoom meeting Ginger and Will both. And when the zombie apocalypse ends, I'd really like to hang out with y'all. You're pretty inspiring. And yeah, let me get to that question. Because we talk about this in almost a cliche way in our culture, right? And there's a shorthand for this, which is, and it's an accurate cliche, and it's good that we say it, but it's just not enough. What we do is, now we've finally graduated to a point where we say, well, it's not weakness, it's strength, and it takes strength to reach out. And that's absolutely right. But it doesn't tell the whole tale, right? Because what we think, if you look at some of the way that we try and reach veterans, is we just say they need to be encouraged to get help. What we're missing is something that I know that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris understand. And I know from my conversations with them, and they understand that there's something happens when you go into the military. And that something is a really necessary thing. And this can't be prevented, but it can be addressed. And here's what it is. There is a really necessary and important form of brainwashing that happens when you enter the military. And what that form of brainwashing is, and that sounds like I'm saying something negative, but I'm not. What it is it teaches you that what you're doing is no big deal. It's not that hard, right? And if they didn't grind that into us from the moment we got off the bus in basic, then we wouldn't do the hard stuff that it takes to protect the country, right? I mean, if I was a military intelligence officer, and my job in Afghanistan was to collect information, which meant I had to go into rooms all over. I had to drive around with my translator, and I had to go sit down in meetings with people who I didn't know whether they wanted to kidnap or kill me or just give me good information, and I had to keep doing it. And I had to sit there and figure out how many dudes between me and the door, how long would it take to get to my vehicle. I did that over and over again. But I didn't get any firefights. I didn't get blown up. But just every day I would go out and I would think, I don't know if this is the day I'm going to get kidnapped. But the thing is, they had to grind into me that wasn't a big deal, because if they didn't, I couldn't keep going into those meetings. I couldn't keep going and retrieving that information that was so important and bringing it back. Just like my buddies who were in firefights couldn't go out on the next patrol if they didn't believe that everybody else was doing harder stuff than them. A buddy of mine who was kind of my mentor in going through the VA's PTS program said to me once, he said, man, somewhere there is a D-Day vet sitting in a VFW hall explaining to people that it was no big deal because he was in the third wave, or he was in the back of the landing craft, right? No matter who you are, the system makes sure that you understand that somebody has it tougher than you. And again, that's necessary, because we can't do these difficult jobs if they don't get that into our mind. The problem is we haven't figured out how to flip that switch back off when people leave. And that's what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and Jill Biden, by the way, understand, is that where our work is in doing a couple of things. One, making sure that we have conversations with people when they come back from deployment that are real conversations and that continue, and that they have those conversations when they separate as well. And those conversations are along the lines of like, okay, you need to know that that was actually crazy, and human beings aren't meant to do that kind of thing without it affecting them. And then the next part is a warm handoff. When you go from one post to another in the military, somebody is responsible for handing you off and making sure you get there. There is a non-commissioned officer whose job it is to report, yeah, Kander got to, Fort Leonard Wood, where you're supposed to be. But when you leave, and they know where you're going, they know your home of record, there's nobody responsible for checking in at the VA to make sure that you got enrolled. There's nobody doing that warm handoff on your last time moving when you're in the military. And finally, what I'd say about this is that the other thing that we tend to say in politics, in addition to we just got to encourage people to get help, that doesn't do enough. The other thing we tend to say is we have to serve veterans because they served us. Well, again, that's true. But it's not the whole story, because the whole story is when you listen to people like Will and you listen to people like Ginger, what you understand, and Claire, what you understand is that we have to serve veterans and we have to look out for veterans because veterans offer something pretty special to our community and they have a lot of service left to give. And especially in a time where this is a very unique conflict. History is not being made by generals standing around sand tables and maps making decisions about where to send units. History is being made by corporals like Will, being made by people who are standing on street corners making split-second decisions about whether to fire or not, whether to give a certain order or not, whether to engage or not. Also making split-second decisions about what to say to a local provincial governor. We're talking 22-year-old kids who are trying to figure out whether to give a few $million to somebody, right? What that means is that responsibility has been pushed to the lowest level it's ever been pushed to in the history of warfare. And then these folks come home and they have enormous skill sets. And we act like, oh, well, if you get some job training, we might have a responsibility for it. I'm the president of a major national nonprofit. And if two people walk in the door and one of them is a civilian with a Harvard MBA and the other is an E5 straight out of the military, I'm taking the E5 for every management position in my place. And Joe Biden gets that. And Jill Biden gets that. And you know why? Because they're a military family. I have this place that I run called Veterans Community Project. And a few months ago, right before the pandemic started, Dr. Biden came and we did a tour. And she said, as a military family, we understand the value that folks still have to give when they come home, the service they still have to give. So that's why the VA and vets courts, what they have in common that the Biden administration understands is that they are built with an understanding of what veterans have been through. All of these initiatives that come out of the Trump administration and out of Republicans generally to try and move everything over to the private sector because they think the private sector is so inherently virtuous, doesn't understand that when I go to the VA to have them look at my shoulder or my back, they're not just looking at anybody's shoulder or back. They look at the shoulders and backs of people who carried 50 pounds all the time. That's what they do. They see it differently. And when they look at my mind, they understand that, I'm going to say a lot of the same things as the 5 guys with PTSD who came in that same morning, but they know what to say to me and they know how to make sure I understand that it's not abnormal. So I've talked too long, but that's what a Biden administration has to offer. You're right, Claire. It's more than just not being Trump. It is the fact that it has been since the Eisenhower administration that we had a family in the White House who understood what it was like to give one last final hug to their child before they went to war. And that matters a lot. And before I finish, I would just say also Gary Peters is one of the best senators there is on these issues. And since we're virtually in Michigan here, you've got to send Gary Peters back. He's a veteran and there's nobody better on these issues. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Jason. I think that, one of the things that I'm not sure that the virtual world knows this, but I just ran for Congress here in Virginia 5. I lost in a primary to a phenomenal candidate who I've been working hard to get elected here in a red district. But one of the things that I think is really important that America understand, and this is getting right to you, Will, but that it's not just about, you know, what we owe to veterans in making them whole again and having civilian lives of meaning. And this is part of what I find so compelling about the Joe Biden, the policy approach to veterans and civilian lives of meaning is we need people who are willing to lay down their lives and make these sacrifices, not just those people, but their families. We need them in positions of power. We need them in positions where they're making real decisions. And Will, I think you're a great person to follow up on this because, you know, you talked a little bit about getting help, but so much of your getting help and your success story came from the Obama administration leaning into alternative sentencing and judicial reform. And that's not just a veteran issue. That's a larger issue in this country, but it affects so many veterans. So I'm excited to hear you give us your sort of 2 cents on getting help and how we make that more possible for our veterans, how we help our veterans get help.
Oh, thank you. Sorry about that. I was trying to unmute. Yeah, I think for me, one of the most important things that I've seen in the work that a Joe Biden and a Kamala Harris administration will do is investing the funds towards making sure that we can get the care that we need. That when those of us who are struggling are in the point where we need help. When I'm seeing it so much right now during this pandemic with issues with trying to get into treatment or referring other veterans into treatment or inability to get appointments. We get the ubiquity of telemedicine versus with no ability to get in face appointments for med management, for any of the myriad of things that can be offered to help a person in their recovery, and especially the specific ones that veterans need for co-occurring issues, whether it's substance use from a self-medicative angle plus the effects of trauma. And then you look at the socioeconomic issues of trying to survive in an environment right now where everything's shut down and nobody's offering any money to help anybody. There's so much that can happen with an administration that cares, and so much that can happen, like what Jason's saying, especially an administration that knows what it's like to give that final hug. I think for me, that moment where I came in the USS Denver, and I was walking down the gangplank, and I'm looking around at all the other Marines and sailors hugging their families and their kids, and how happy everyone was, and I was crushed. And for a while, I thought it was because there wasn't anybody necessarily waiting, but it wasn't. I learned it was because my family was on that ship, and I was losing it. And every day I do the work that I do to remind myself that I'm still part of that family, because it still matters. And that's something that I'm going to carry with me forever. And it's so important that we cherish that. And it's so important that our elected officials cherish that. And yeah, it's hard even to put into words. It's so important. And that's what I think is going to happen. Those of us who are struggling need to know that we're heard, need to know that people care, and that there can be help when we need it.
Well, I'm a survivor of sexual assault in the military, and I have struggled. I'm approaching an anniversary of my assault, and I've been struggling the last few weeks, honestly. And I had an in-person appointment at the VA just last week, and it set me back. It was brutal. It put me back in a place where I was questioning whether or not, my service counts. And that is so hard when, as you say, your family is in that unit, in that uniform, and it's what you know and it's what you want to be a part of. And for whatever reason, whether it's, leaving the service, was really hard for me, and I felt like I had to do it in order to get well. But the importance of that family and the recognition of that family and providing that, finding it, making it accessible to our veterans is so critical. I've certainly found that family in Ginger Miller. So Ginger, yeah, I'd love for you to talk about just a little bit about your sort of the way you found help, and then the way you think that, Joe Biden and this country can make help sort of easier to access for our veterans.
Okay. Thank you, Claire. And yes, that was difficult for you when you went to the VA hospital. And I just think that it's a shame. I was looking for you for like, what, 2 days, 3 days, because I hadn't heard from you. I knew something had happened. I just didn't know what. And one of the things that I'm finding, with all of us out here campaigning for a Biden-Harris ticket is that as women veterans in particular, we are showing how strong we are, but we're also being extremely vulnerable in these conversations because you really didn't have to share that. As a woman veterans advocate, I was really sad that you were hurt in that way. It's been a long time since any campaign or administration has really paid attention to the needs of women veterans. And I'm not going to say that any administration has ever dropped the ball. It's just unfortunate that no other administration has ever picked it up. Women veterans have always been lost in the shuffle. Anytime you go to a VA hospital and you have to go across the street to get a mammogram, it's an issue. And then you get a mammogram machine and you go there, then the next 3 years you go back, they spend thousands of dollars on a women veteran center. It looks beautiful on the inside, but there's no mammogram machine on the inside. And then for women veterans who are suffering from military sexual trauma, you have to walk through all of these catcalling men to get to the beautiful center for women veterans inside of this hospital. Something is wrong with that picture. Because if you really stop and think, why don't you have an outside door that will lead in there so these vulnerable women don't have to go back and forth? One of the things I love about Joe Biden is that he gets it. And not just for veterans and military families, for women veterans. There are things set out in his policy points that speak to our needs and things that he's going to do within the first 200 days. And one of them, he wants to make sure that we're getting quality health care. If you're not healthy, you can't thrive. I don't care what type of job you have, how prepared you are for the job. If you have issues when you go to the VA hospital and you come out of there feeling like you have been raped again, that's an issue. We need a commander-in-chief that has empathy, that as Jason says, that knows what it's like to give that last hug, because it's stuff like that. It's those feelings that run so deep, they never go away. And when it comes for me, I didn't get help. I had to help myself out of that situation. And years later, I'm still helping myself by serving others to make sure that other women veterans know where to go for help so that they don't have to struggle the way that I did. It just doesn't make sense to me in the United States of America that women veterans are homeless, that women are being abused in the military, and nobody's doing anything about it. But I do know that Joe Biden gets it. And I will say that he has been tugged and pulled throughout this whole campaign. Something pops up, he's speaking on it, he's running, he's doing. And to me, that shows that he cares. He cares about what's, I don't care what has happened, good, bad, or indifferent. He's been there throughout this campaign, sincerely. He's been there. So for me personally, again, I want an administration, and I am being selfish here. I want an administration that cares for women veterans. I raise my right hand to serve this country. The commander in chief is responsible for me, not the second lady, the first lady, no disrespect, but a commander in chief that understands why I raise my right hand and what I went through as a veteran, and more particular as a woman veteran. So when you talk about help, I believe our help is on the way. So I'm casting my vote for Joe Biden.
Thank you, Ginger. You're always so fabulous, and really do always drive it home on Joe Biden, because Ginger worked in previous administrations and has the utmost respect for Barack Obama and his administration, but knows where we need to step it up. And I think one of the most powerful things I've heard in all the sort of events and activities that I participated in with veterans on this campaign was a woman last week, or actually probably just a couple of days ago now, said, Joe Biden has said, we're going to make change flat out. I'm not interested in appeasing anyone or making anyone feel comfortable. There are things we have to do. We have to make changes flat out. And in the veteran community, in the military community, that rings very true. I think that I've spent a lot of time talking with veterans with all sorts of different experiences. And I've heard a couple times folks saying, veterans are like, they're a minority. Veterans have their own health problems. They have their own familial issues. They have their own, it's like we're from a different country. And at first I sort of bristled at that concept, but in reality, we do have our own health issues. Does anyone else, any of my friends on my block here in Virginia, do they have to get screened for burn pit toxification of their lungs? No, I don't think so. Do they have to worry about that? No, they don't. And so I guess I think I'm getting back to sort of the judicial experience and the way that we see veterans in the law. And I'd love it if, Jason, if you'd be willing to talk just a little bit about the ways in which policy could affect, the homelessness in the veteran population. And Will, I'll get to you in a minute, but just to sort of wrap up, maybe not specifically homelessness, but how do you see reforms, any particular reform that we can undertake in the next 4 years, in the first year, in the first 180 days, that is going to impact veterans directly? Jason?
There you go. I'll go. I appreciate the question. I'll go to the 30,000 foot view, because this would affect homelessness and everything else. And that is that at the federal level, we have far too narrow a definition of a veteran. And it's something that most people do not know. Most people assume that a veteran is anybody who wore the uniform. That's what I think a veteran is. I think it's somebody who raised their right hand and wrote a blank check up to and including their life to the country. But that's not actually what the federal system considers a veteran. There are all sorts of loopholes and cracks in the system through which people fall through. Everything from their discharge status to whether they were active duty, how long they were active duty, how long they served, all sorts of things. And that causes a lot of people to get missed. And especially if you are experiencing issues related to your service, and then you go, because it's what your network of support tells you to do, you go to the VA and they say, oh, you're technically not a veteran. that is unhelpful in so many different ways. You know, one of the things we do at Veterans Community Project is we fill a gap in the system by extending our services to every single type of veteran. I would love for that part of our work to be obsolete, because I don't really care what your DD-214, which is your form you get when you separate, for those listening who didn't serve. I don't really care what's on your DD-214. I guess I really just care that you have one. And if you do, then I think that you are deserving of service. And we've made some good changes out there, you know, over the years to make sure that more people can get access to things like mental health, but we haven't promulgated them. We haven't made sure people know about it. When you think about like dishonorable discharges, look, there's an awful lot of people out there who have a dishonorable discharge because they got two DUIs. Well, some of them got 2 DUIs in between their 4 combat deployments. And I don't think it's that hard to figure out what might have been going on there. And so we need a system that is more expansive and exercises a greater degree of compassion and doesn't have such a narrow view of what counts as a veteran.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. I really appreciate that so much. The discharge, there are so many issues as we, you know, just the last 20 years of the way that folks are discharged from the military that is so destructive and so problematic, especially in the community of folks who are struggling with addiction. As you say, 2 DUIs in between your 4 combat deployments, and you are given a discharge that prevents you from getting the help you need. It's unacceptable. So Will, if you will close us out here on the policy discussion, but just what can we do in the next 180 days that's going to have a direct impact on the veterans that you are working with?
I think we need to give everyone a voice. I think one of the most important things we can do is remember the fact that as veterans, our sense of duty and our sense of honor, courage, and commitment doesn't fade. And now is the time where we can help make a difference. I know in the early days of 2016, Senators Reid and Whitehouse, I had the pleasure of seeing both of them speak. And they talked about how veterans are positioned to uniquely help bridge the gap to make a difference in troubled times like this, to help convey a message of hope, to advocate for one another, to advocate for others, that's what we do. Like when Jason was saying, what we think is normal is to struggle and to run towards the sound of conflict and to make a difference. And the sense that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the understanding that there's something else that's more important and doing what needs to be done anyway. So I think right now, what we can do is, it's not too late. We can make a difference. We can give some of our time to, whether it's in the phones, whether it's getting the word out there, talking to other vets. We need to challenge the idea that veterans just sit back and allow somebody else to speak for us. And me specifically speaking from the enlisted side here, like, sure, there was a time when I may not have an opinion, or officers or NCOs may have told me what my opinion was, but those days are over. So I'm proud to have an opinion now, and it's important that it gets out there. So to wrap that up quickly, I would say it's not over till it's over. We need to really help make sure that a Biden-Harris administration happens. That's going to help make sure that the VA survives privatization efforts. It's going to make sure that we have places to go to get specific care that we need. It's where we can have environments that are culturally competent to what it means to be a veteran and what our specific needs are. It's where we can get trauma-informed treatment, trauma-informed care. Doctors don't even understand what trauma means. And when you walk into a room and a whole bunch of veterans, none of us have our back to the front door. Why is that? Right? We all laugh because we know. Right? The person with their back to the door is the healthiest one out of all of us. And that's our joke, right? But those kind of things are what happen at a VA. And in case I'm going circular, I get excited about this stuff. I hope I answered the question.
You sure did. And I'm going to give Ginger a break. I'm not going to ask her another question because she's been on an event solidly for the last 3 hours. But I am going to say, Will, something you said really rings true. And it's a great way to close out this event, which is, making voices heard. It is very powerful for me as a Marine veteran myself, as the wife of a still active duty Army veteran whose experience, whose mental state affects our family of 5 every day, and we're working together every day to sort of achieve a normal that's acceptable to all of us. Making our voices heard and getting people to understand the veteran experience is so important. But the other thing that Will touched on, and this is getting right back to Joe Biden and to the election that is pressing on us 11 days away. Our voices matter to a lot of people in this country, and we have powerful voices right now. We are capable of having tough conversations that a lot of other people are not comfortable having. Get on the phones. Go talk to your neighbor. There is still a huge portion of this country that doesn't know who they're voting for on election day. You all, every one of you, all the folks who are listening, veteran or not, but I'm specifically talking to the veterans now. We have the ability to make a difference in a state like Michigan, in a state like Pennsylvania, Arizona. I mean, I've looked at the numbers of all the states that have huge, large veteran populations. We have the ability to make a difference in this election. We can make our voices heard by electing a president who will continue to make our voices heard and give us and give America a true understanding of who their defenders are. With that, I just want to say thank you to Jason, to Will, to Ginger for sharing your stories and being here with us tonight. And taking the time to talk with folks from Michigan and hopefully and all over. I understand that we're getting quite a bit of views on Facebook, and I'm glad to have the audience here that we did. Go out and make your voice heard, please. So thank you all, and it's been great to have you. Have a good Friday night. All the best.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.